One of the things you quote in here is Oliver Wendell Holmes says, think things, not words. What did he mean by that?
It's perhaps my only quote that I ever use of Holmes, honestly, but think things, not words. In other words, don't allow just these terms with all your connotations, all these things you associate with it, to control the way you think. Think about reality. So rather than saying, I don't like capitalism or, I don't like free enterprise, say, okay, well, let's think about economic reality. What are the rules and principles that we know from studying history and economic reality, actual economic experiments that we just need to take on board? So the relationship between supply and demand or the price function, they don't care about your feelings. You want to know those things. And so the question is always, okay, well, what's economically true? And then if we first ask that question, we think things, economic reality rather than terms, I think we're much more likely to find a solution.
So when we talk about an abstract word like socialism, you got to drill down to say, okay, what does that really mean day to day?
Yeah, what does it mean? What's the definition? And also when it's been applied, when people claiming to be socialists have actually tried to implement it in history, what has resulted? That's a relevant question. So people that advocate socialism can't just simply avoid the 40 or 50 or 60 actual socialist experiments.
What are some good examples of socialism tried and failed?
Obviously, the late Soviet Union, certainly under Lenin and Stalin, was a catastrophe that led to the deaths of millions of people. The communist revolution in China led to probably 65 million deaths. The most recent one, of course, is in Venezuela. People will often say, well, we don't believe in these violent revolutions. We want democratic socialism, where you get socialism in the ballot box. They had that in Venezuela.
What happened in Venezuela? Venezuela is cruising along, one of the wealthiest countries in the Americas. And then they've got new leadership. New leadership did what 5 things that caused it to crash? What did they do?
Well, the big thing, of course, it was initially Hugo Chavez, who, as a kind of left-wing populist, convinced enough voters that their system was unjust. And so once he got into power, he started nationalizing industries. So, Venezuela is a huge petroleum industry. They started nationalizing that. They did the sorts of things that socialists do.
We're at a level of they nationalized petroleum. Now, okay, why is that a bad thing?
Well, that's a bad thing because if you've got a private company, it's going to have to compete for customers, right? It has to compete based on global prices. If the customers don't like it, they might go somewhere else. Well, whenever an industry is nationalized, we know this again from the 20th century, it becomes hugely inefficient and has a very difficult time responding to supply and demand. It lacks all the basic incentives. So if you have a company that's nationally owned, just think of the DMV. There's a reason that you're treated differently at the DMV than you are treated when you go, say, to Chick-fil-A or McDonald's, right? There's no competition for the DMV.
I always get into the first-class line at DMV.
Yes, exactly. I always look for that, never find it. No, but I mean, this is the reality. In a socialist system, your incentives are not to serve customers. Your incentive is to curry favor with whoever the regulator or the person in power is.
So Venezuela nationalized the oil. What else did they do?
Well, they messed, of course, with currency. So it's a sort of cluster of different things. I think the collectivization or nationalization of industry was the big thing. Massive corruption, which, socialists aren't the only form, that's not the only form of political corruption, but of course there is massive corruption. So you lack the rule of law. This is what you often see in socialist countries. You have a government that's extremely large, but doesn't even do the basic things that government is supposed to do, which is to play a neutral umpire and to protect people from violating the rights of others. It ceased to do that, and very quickly it's ended up, one of the major basket cases in Latin America, and Maduro, the new leader, has continued Chavez's policy, and it's anyone's guess what exactly is going to happen in the next few years. But as long as they maintain these policies, they're certainly not going to get out of the mess they're in.